Brian.
I guess it's okay if I'm being recorded.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah, that's the point. Thank you for taking some time here to jump on the podcast tonight.
Hey, you're absolutely welcome, Todd. My pleasure.
So let's kind of go through the things that you're doing, because I mean, I thought that I was a busy guy, but you are just, I mean, it's insane. You're an instructor for the BCIT Radio Arts and Entertainment program. That's, of course, we work side by side. You help out with the Toddcast, actually, some of the social media marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's my fault.
You're the GM of the Port Moody Panthers. You're the owner and editor of the BCHL network, media relations with the BC Super Week and the Odlum Brown Van Open. You contribute to the Elite Prospects. Where do you find the time?
Well, because of the pandemic, sadly, there was no Odlum Brown Van Open nor BC Super Week over the last 2 years.
It's been a while, hey?
Yeah, in fact, if those two events return in 2022, it'll be the first events of that series in Super Week's case, and for the Odlum Brown Van Open at Hollyburn, like it'll be the first one since 2019 as well. Like, it's crazy to think that it'll be 3 years between events. In the case, like, I mean, that's even if we can do it safely in 2022, right? But in terms of finding the time, I mean, you mentioned about me being an instructor at BCIT and working alongside you in that regard. That makes, like, the two events with Super Week and the Odlum Brown Van Open, those are in the summer. So we get summers off, as teachers do, because there's no school. And so that affords me the time really with those events. Like, they start to ramp up. Actually, the timing is really kind of nice. It ramps up in late May, early June, and then into July and August, which is exactly when things sort of quieten down at BCIT for us, because the students are obviously on their summer break as well. So although my day-to-day, like, full-time job is still BCIT in that time, obviously it's a little different without students around. It's more prep work and stuff like that. So and then in terms of finding time for the Panthers, like, that's a Saturday night thing. It's only about 5 months of the year. And then I bring my kids to the games as well, so they help out. They're on the payroll of the team. So it's something awesome. Where it's like it's a family affair in that regard.
Yeah. And so knowing you, of course, working side by side with you every day, I know that you're as big of a sports guy as you are. You're just as big of a music guy. So if you had to pick music or sports, which gets the nod?
Oh, if you asked me that question 20, 25 years ago, it would be music without a doubt.
Yeah.
And then now it's probably sports. And a big reason for that is just where my life is at. I mean, 20, 25 years ago, I didn't have any kids. And so the idea of, going to a show or blowing money on CDs or whatever the case was, it was a little easier to swallow. But anything I do in sports right now is relatively inexpensive. Like if I'm just watching a Canucks game or watching a Lions game or whatever. So that's that I think might be a big difference between the two. I mean, I still love music. Like I use my Spotify a lot. I still listen to Evolution. Like, I love our station at BCIT. The music we play is killer. And it helps me discover a lot of new artists, but I just can't dedicate the time that I used to, in the early 90s through to the early 2000s that I used to.
Right. And did you catch the game tonight, the Canucks and the Kraken? Did you listen at all, watch it all?
You know what? I tuned in a little bit on the radio, and then I was trying to find a stream online because I saw Canucks Twitter was like on fire, that there was no broadcast on TV, that is. And I did end up finding it out. I was actually watching a wrestling pay-per-view tonight, so I didn't get to see a lot of the Canucks game. But I did have it on for a little bit. I had like the dual screen going on, wrestling pay-per-view, Canucks game.
I love that you're just still to this day, such a big wrestling fan. Who's your favorite all time?
It's got to be Triple H.
Oh yeah.
It's got to be Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Yeah, who goes by, I mean, his real name is Paul Levesque. And what's funny though is that he's not that much older than you and I. And so like in Hunter's case, like he was one of the like real kingpins of the Attitude Era, like with Stone Cold and The Rock and Undertaker and all those guys, right? And I mean, I was watching them when would that have been? That would have been in my mid to late 20s. So it's not the same guys and women that I watched when I was a kid. Yet my favorite wrestler comes from that time, not the when I was a kid time when I watched wrestling.
Interesting. So what is your first memory of watching WW? Was it WWF or E when you first started watching?
Yeah, it would have been F at the time. And that was before like there was a huge lawsuit with the World Wildlife Federation.
That's right.
Which is hilarious because it's like, are you ever going to confuse the two?
Yeah, well, you've seen the picture of the pandas, one panda smashing the chair over the other panda's head, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like no one's ever going to confuse, you know, people saving wildlife and preserving wildlife around the world with, you know, people in leotards beating each other up. Like that's just
right.
No one's going to confuse that. But anyway, I think it worked out better for Vince McMahon anyway to become entertainment as opposed to federation in that case. But
yeah.
So my earliest memory, you know what, I don't have a specific like event or something like that, but I want to say that I was like, I mean, I remember watching it when I was 8-9 years old. Like I remember heyday of Hulk Hogan. Like I remember when he beat Iron Sheik for the championship. I remember watching
the camel clutch. What an awesome finishing move.
He kicked out of the camel clutch. Like what the hell is that? And when you're like, nobody gets out of the camel clutch. Like, you know, you can't do that to my hero. And so I remember watching that. And I remember Saturday night's main event. Like, I don't know if you ever remember that. Like Saturday Night Live would be like preempted, and then like wrestling would come on at like 11:30 at night. And I mean, it's so funny. You think back when you were a kid and you're like, what an idiot I was, because like I was like, how are they wrestling at like 11:30 at night? Like that's ridiculous. Right. There's this huge like stadium full of people, and it's so late. Not thinking like, duh, it's pre-recorded, right? So I remember that, and then I have a really fond memory. Like WrestleMania 3 was on my 11th birthday.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, like the actual event was on my birthday, and that was like the big Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. You know, like, and then they were billing it like Andre had never been defeated, he'd never been pinned, and then, you know, Hogan's the champ and has been for 3 years. And back then they had pay-per-view, but it was way more prevalent in the US. And so in my case, like you had to go buy a ticket, like whatever, $15, go down to like the Pacific Coliseum, and they had like 4 screens set up on each side, and you went there and you watched it on this giant screen with all these other wrestling fans.
Oh, crazy.
And I went there with like, I mean, I went with my folks and a few friends and my sister for that was like what we did on my birthday. Like that was my birthday party, was we watched WrestleMania 3.
What's your favorite sport to play?
I can't play anything. like I really, yeah, like I mean I'm cool with throwing a football around or throwing a frisbee around, or ping pong's okay. I used to be halfway decent at pool because growing up we had a pool table in the basement, but really I'm not athletically inclined at all.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
So what's the music in the Wiebe house? Like as a kid, what are your parents playing?
Well, it's still, I mean, there's a reason why it's the music I like today. So growing up, we always had records on, and we always had we had an 8-track in the car. And so some 8-tracks that I remember specifically. And I mean, I think it was because of the time. Like I wish I had some like cool real rock like 8-tracks to tell you about, but I don't. Like the 8-tracks was like ABBA, the Grease soundtrack. You know, like that was the stuff I remember on the 8-tracks. But in terms of LPs, like I remember the Red and the Blue Beatles albums, you know, like a double bill full, like the whole record. I remember looking at those, and I remember my parents playing them. My mom had a much better taste in music than my dad did. At least growing up now, I'm like, yeah, the stuff he liked kind of sucked, and the stuff she liked was kick-ass. So lots of Beatles, lots of Doors, that kind of stuff, Stones. Like I remember the Stones album covers always, as a kid, I was always like, this is crazy, like super psychedelic, or like Sticky Fingers with like the zipper, like all that kind of stuff. Like I was like, that's really cool that anyone would even think to do that on an album cover. And so that's the kind of stuff that I remember, like especially when I was really little, although it was well past that time, right? Like they were playing that stuff in the early 80s. Yet of course that, like, the Beatles hadn't put out anything in 12 years, right? So my parents were still listening to that. But they also, like, they went in a strange direction, because they would have stuff by like Manhattan Transfer. Like, I don't know who that is. I don't know if you know who that is, but like it's like a acapella, 2 guys, 2 girls or something like that. And stuff like that. So that was kind of weird, I thought. And then like I remember Zamfir records. Like, do you remember the guy with like
the pan flute?
Yeah. And so I remember seeing those records, and I was like, this is great. But so, like, to this day, if you played Zamfir, I'd probably know a handful of songs.
Wow. So music's always kind of just been part of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Huge. In fact, Manhattan Transfer was I want to say the first, no, it wasn't the first concert I went to. Second, probably.
What was the first?
Jackson 5 Victory Tour, man.
No, did you seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where was that?
It was unreal. That was at BC Place in '84. And I remember my second cousin, his name is Mark, he used to always have, like, I don't know how he had some like concert ticket hookup, but he'd get tickets for my aunt and uncle all the time and whatever. So he got us these tickets for the Jackson 5 Victory Tour, because we were like sold out in like 5 seconds. Because they were reuniting, and Michael was Michael at that point, right? 84, right? It's 2 years after Thriller. So like he was just like the biggest star in the world at the time. And our seats were horrible, like just absolutely, like, think it's like, you know, second to last back row at BC Place.
Right. Comes with a Kleenex.
Like, yeah, totally. Right. And it's like, make sure you have like everything that you need to make sure you're not going back down because you're 2 miles from the floor of the stadium. So anyway.
Yeah.
But what was really funny about that, and so they had the big screens up at BC Place, which if you remember the old BC Place, there were no screens in the middle. It was at both ends, right? And so when they came out on stage, of course I have binoculars, and when they came out on stage, the only way we could tell which one was Michael was the sequin glove. Like we could see the glove.
Wow.
And so that was the only way we could differentiate Michael from Tito or Jermaine or whoever. And so, but it was unreal because he would, like, his brothers were so gracious. And again, I don't remember this at the time, but I remember the songs. And so he still played Billie Jean, and he still played like Beat It and like all the massive hits that weren't his brother's songs at all, right? But no, that was the first show I ever went to, and I remember the souvenir I bought about a bandana, like not even like the triangle, like, or diamond bandana, like a headband.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like an elastic headband, it was like a scarf ish material, like a silk that you would tie in, like Karate Kid style.
Yeah.
And it said Jackson 5 Victory Tour on it.
And of course, back in the day, if you didn't have that friend that you guys had, I mean, there were times where you would be camping overnight to see a really good show. Like that was just, that's what you did.
I did that too. I mean, even into the early 90s, like I would go, and the funniest thing, I can't remember what show it was, but I remember camping out and there was like nobody else there. Like we didn't need to camp out at all. Like it's like, you know, we don't need to camp out, but we did.
What's been your favorite concert? Can you nail it down, or too hard?
Oh man, yeah, it's probably too hard. Yeah, I mean, Nirvana was awesome. Just seeing them was unreal.
Where did you see them? Now that's a band that I never got to see.
They played here, so it was. I'm not one of those people that can lend themselves to being like, oh, I was at the Town Pump show in '91, which like apparently all of Vancouver was at.
Right, for a 300 person venue, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Where they were opening for like Screaming Trees. So no, I didn't get to go to that. Never mind the fact that I was 15. But I saw them. So what happened was, I remember on CFOX, they announced the show. And we were like, okay, we got to get tickets. And that was one we did camp out for. and we got tickets. And it was in early 94. So it was like January 3rd or 4th or something like that. And we camped out, we got our tickets. It was at the Forum, PNE Forum. And like we're driving home or we're driving somewhere that same day, and CFOX is like, second show added, Nirvana at the Forum. It was the day before we had tickets. So they actually added the second show because of booking or the tour or whatever for the day prior. And so we were like, all those jerks are going to get to see them first. And we camped out. Like it was just
second show would probably be better anyway.
Like we were so mad because we were just like, that's a ripoff. Like we put in all this effort, camped out, we're like freaking out that we could see Kurt and whatever. And yeah, we got to see the second show. It was still an unreal show though. Like he was, I mean, it was as good as you would expect.
Yeah.
You know, and then he was gone 4 months later.
Wow.
Right? Like that's what was crazy about it, was that they didn't play that many shows between when I saw them and then when the band didn't exist anymore.
Wow.
So that one really sticks out. Not just because he's gone, but because it was such a rad show. Like it was a really, really good show.
Mm-hmm.
Played with Butthole Surfers. Like it was good.
Well, cool.
Yeah, it was a really, really cool one. Yeah, I mean, some of the Lollapaloozas were great.
That's like mine. I mean, like, with the Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Ministry, Jesus and Mary Chain, like
Ice Cube,
yeah. Chili Peppers. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you can't get that. You can't. There's no way that show would happen today.
No, I don't think so. Well, especially
Soundgarden. I mean, yeah.
Well, and not in that genre, right? Like that type of music just doesn't hit the way that it did 30 years ago. And so as a result, you're not going to get those bands together. Like, I mean, Lolla 95 was great for me because
that was what, the Pumpkins and Hole and
no, yeah, sort of. You got your half right. So 94 was good, and I was really excited to see Green Day and Pumpkins and Beastie Boys. And who else was on that bill? Anyway, it doesn't matter. L7. But really 95 for me hit better because there were more bands that I liked. So it was Beck, it was Sonic Youth, it was Hole, it was Jesus Lizard, it was Pavement. And so, like, I mean, I liked a little more of the alternative rock, so to speak. Yeah. The stuff that was a little more weird and out there. And Sonic Youth are one of my favorites ever. So really, to see that show, I went down and saw the opening night of the tour in the Gorge in George Washington, and then drove back that night and went the next day. Yeah, of course I did. And then the next day went and saw the show here at Thunderbird Stadium. So it was outstanding. Wow. And I actually got pretty pissed off because Sinead O'Connor was great. She actually put on a really good show. We didn't know what to expect because it's like you've got David Yao from Jesus Lizard coming out and being like the weirdest dude ever, and then here comes Sinead.
She's like, hold my beer.
Like singing like beautiful folk songs, right? Like it was really kind of wild. But is this after the burning of the flag on SNL? Ripping the picture of the Pope.
Ripping the picture?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it must have been, because I think that picture of the Pope came like when she was much more popular, right? Like I think that was like Nothing Compares to You time. And this was like 95, which would have been 3 or 4 years later, I think. So yeah, it would have been after that. In fact, yes, because she had hair. And I don't even say that jokingly, but like she actually straight up had hair, and wasn't shaved, Sinead, at the time. So anyway, I got pissed off because she ended up leaving the tour like later that summer for whatever reason. It was, I can't remember if it was health related or what, but she was replaced by Elastica. And Elastica was like one of my favorite bands and still is to this day, like ever. And so I was like, okay, if I saw a show that was like Beck and Sonic Youth and Hole and Pavement, Mighty Mighty Boss Stones and Elastica, that would be like unreal. So yeah, some of the, and I mean, I even Lollapalooza 96, because it was like Metallica and Ramones, like that was just Rancid. It was an unreal show.
Yeah, I do remember when they announced that, everybody was like, Metallica, like what the hell? Because that was supposed to be the alternative tour. It was like
Right.
not bands that you would expect, and like Metallica. That's what?
Well,
What?
that tour that year was, in my mind, like that was the end of Lollapalooza as an alternative music festival.
Yeah.
Like 95 was the last one, which means the tour itself, as we remember it, in that like same in the same what's the word, in the same vein or in the same belief structure of alternative music, that 91 show, that's where it stopped. Like 95 was when it stopped. And then in 96, and that's not to take anything away from Metallica because they were unreal.
Yeah.
But that was a turning point, I think, in the festival. Like now Lollapalooza is not even close to what it used to be.
Well, now it's just a 1 day thing or a weekend thing. Grant Park in Chicago, it's a destination event as opposed to they travel and come to your city.
Well,
And
and
stuff.
it'll be every genre under the sun.
Right.
Like,
But
like even down to pop music.
this is a tough one, Brian. Most overrated band.
Oh, geez, you're killing me here. Ever? Um, I don't know if I can pick one. Because there's bands that I really, really like that people think are overrated. There's people that'd be like, Hole is completely overrated. Like there's no, Courtney is like not even close to as talented as anyone thinks she is. But I like it. Like even the Pumpkins performance here at Lolla 94, like it gets like horrifically panned. Like people are like, they were terrible. And I'm like, they were amazing. Like I thought the Pumpkins were great.
Mm.
Like, did they sound like the record? No. But the Pumpkins aren't one of those bands that can sound like their record. Like they just don't. So I don't know, man. I don't know if I could pick. Because well, and it's funny that you say this because one of the most so my wife, she said that the Beatles are overrated.
What?
And
Come on.
no, and you know what though? Like I love the Beatles. Like they're one of my most favorite bands ever. But they might be. And any of those bands might be. Elvis might be overrated. But that doesn't take away from their influence. And I know like this is like hot take, but the fact is like, and I think the Beatles are one of the greatest bands ever. I really do. But I also get the side where someone goes, yeah, you know what? They're not as great as some make them out to be. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
You could even argue Zeppelin for that. Sabbath. Yeah. Like you really could argue all the huge bands. Maybe they are a bit overrated.
Stones, Nirvana, like all, Pearl Jam. Like you could say that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. With the Beatles, I just look at their body of work in such a short period of time.
Oh, they crushed it.
Like you don't. But and Nirvana's the same. Like you don't do what they did in only 5 years or only 6 years. And not be that. But
you think about it, like what was the last band after Nirvana that made any sort of giant splash like they did? Like no other band since has done that.
Where basically kick the teeth in of rock music,
change the musical landscape.
Yeah, probably not.
I can't think of anything.
But so I'll ask you this, and I know you're the one doing the interviewing here, but what if they were still together? What if their legacy wasn't just 89 to 94? Because I wonder if maybe that influence would wane over time. And I think that may have been why some people look at like the Stones, or they look at Zeppelin, because Page were still doing like the Unplugged and stuff like in the 90s. Like I wonder about that. Like if Kurt was still with us today and the band was still together, like Pearl Jam is, like not everything Pearl Jam puts out anymore is 10 or Versus or even Vitalogy, right?
I mean, that's interesting because I think that when those bands like that, when they release an album, they are looked at based on their best stuff. Like that's not a Pearl Jam 10, that's not Pearl Jam Versus, but it also shouldn't be. Like, I think that any band that releases an album as good as a new Pearl Jam record or the new, I don't know, Rolling Stones or whatever, any big band, you know, I think that any band would love to be able to release that album, and it's good. It's just not as good as their best.
So it's like Pearl Jam on their worst day is still better than however many other bands on their best day.
Totally.
Yeah, which I guess is where like that you come back to the overrated, right? Like even the weirdest, oddest Beatles stuff on their worst day is still better than a whole ton of other stuff.
Right.
Which is true.
Right. So we went through the list of like Brian does this. When you find time, what are you binging lately? Are you binging anything lately? Do you find time?
You know what? I go back to all my old standards. Like I don't ever binge watch anything new.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. Like I've rewatched Dexter. Not even in
a great series though.
Yeah, for sure. But and not even in anticipation of like the new one coming out in November. Like for me, I really like it. And I will admit that when they announced the reboot of it, I did watch that through again. Because the pandemic afforded a little more time to do that. But I like before I watched that, I think I probably watched it 2 times before that. Just because it's that good. And then same thing with The Office. Like I've binged every episode of The Office. Probably I'm going through it now, probably my 3rd time.
The US or the UK?
No, the US.
You watch the UK?
I never have actually.
Dude, come on.
No, I know. Everyone's like,
so
Ricky
good.
Gervais, it's amazing. Yeah, I know. And then probably Narcos. I always go back to that too.
Oh yeah, Narcos was such a good, and like didn't one of the, was it like a field person where they're like scouting locations or something like that? Didn't they get killed while doing that?
Yeah,
did you hear?
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, I think it was. I can't remember if it was the latest season or the upcoming season, but like because that's the thing about when you talk about Escobar and you talk about all like even in the, because the latest episode or the latest season is Narcos Mexico, and so even when you're talking about all of the cartels in Guadalajara and in Mazatlan and in Tijuana and all these cities, they still have tentacles. Like even in 2021, like they've got tentacles that are still involved in the drug trade and stuff like that. So they still don't like the fact that they're portrayed, and they say it's fiction and whatever, but there's still that thought that it's like, no, we don't want you, talking about El Chapo, or we don't want you talking about whoever. And so I believe it. Like I totally, like, if they're like, hey, you're sniffing around to sort of make sure you've got this authentic scene in Mexico or Central America or South America or whatever for these cartels, like they're gonna know that you're there without a doubt.
Like talk about a high risk job.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're going to be a location scout for the new season of Narcos. Like, no thanks.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, no.
What's the worst job that you've had?
I worked one night in a grocery store. One night, one shift.
And they didn't pay you. They didn't pay you.
They didn't pay me. No. Well, I made them pay me, but they tried to get away with not paying me.
Right.
And so what was funny, because when I applied for the job, like I was just, what was I doing? I had quit my job at a pizza restaurant, and I took a few months off. I put together like a rock show in Maple Ridge, an all ages show. And then I was like, I should probably get a job. Like I should probably, and my mom was cool. Like I was living at home at the time, and I was in my early 20s, and she was totally cool with it. Like no problem. And so I was like, but I should probably do something, because I've been out of work now for 3-4 months or whatever. So luckily it wasn't my mom kicking me in the ass, being like, go get a job. It was me being like, I should probably do something. So I saw the ad in the paper, and it was for overnights. And like the job started, I want to say at 1 or midnight or 1 or something like that till 7 or 8 in the morning. And I know
those are rough hours.
I know, but I was like, you know what? I've got nothing else going on. I can sleep during the day. If I'm going to go to a gig, I can go to a gig and then go to work after that, like whatever. And so I went, and when I went in for the interview, like I had my resume with me, like I'm a prepared guy, and there was like about, I don't know, 10 or 15 of us, and they interviewed us all like at the same time. And I'm like, well, how are you going to get a gauge? Like, as someone who had been in management before and done hiring and done interviews and stuff, I was totally like, how are you going to know if I'm better than this person beside me, or
interviewing all at once? Like, what the hell's going on here?
This person across the table is better than me, or whatever. And then they were like, so you're all hired. And I was like, you don't want my resume? Like, because again, this was before you're applying online for a gig, right? And so then they're like, so which of you could start tonight?
Oh my God.
And I was like, sure, I'm not doing anything. Like, yeah, why not? So there was about 4 of us that said, yeah, we can start tonight, no problem. And so that night I was like trying to get to sleep. Like, I'm like, oh, I'll go to sleep at like 8, sleep till like 11 or 12, and then get up and go to work. I think it was 2. I think I started at 2, and I couldn't sleep. Like I'm not going to sleep at 8 o'clock. Like 20. I'm like 22, 23 years old. Like, just not. And so anyway, I think I ended up dozing off like 11, slept for a couple hours, got up, drove to work, and it was about a 15-minute drive. And and then I went there and I worked, and no training, like literally no training. And it was stocking shelves because it was overnight, right? So they're like, so can you move like this pallet of whatever it is over to here? And I'm like, I have no idea how to use a pallet jack. Like, I work in a restaurant. I never used a pallet jack in my life. And so like I'm crashing the pallet jack into stuff, not causing damage, but like I didn't realize, like, have you ever used a pallet jack?
Yeah, yes, I've used a pallet jack.
So I'm like, I didn't know that you're supposed to pull it. Like, I didn't realize that if you push it, it turns like this way. So I'm pushing this stupid thing, and it's like crashing into like whatever the shelves and stuff. So, and I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, well, they didn't train us. Like, they didn't say, hey, do you know how to use a pallet jack? Because I would have been like, no, show me.
Right. Like, I'm not ready for this.
Like, what the hell? And it's like 3 a.m. So anyway, I had filled out paperwork and stuff, and then I realized, like, I'm like, this kind of sucks. Like, this is not what I want to do. Like, even for a temporary thing. So there was a manager person who came and checked on us like after a couple hours, and they were like, yeah, so what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I still want to see. A couple hours later, I'm like, no, not for me. And they were like, so what do you think? And I'm like, nope, not for me. And they were like, okay, well, you can just go home now then. And I'm like, well, no, like I'm the type of person, like, if I'm there for the shift, I'm there for the shift, then I'm going to work and I'm going to do what I need to do, provided I know how. And I'm like, so no, I'll stick it out till the end. So like an hour left in the shift, they come up and they're like, so what do you think? And I'm like, yeah, no, I already told you. Like,
still no. Yeah.
I'm like, I already told you, like, I'm not down with this. And they were like, okay, so you should just go home. And I was like, I already told you, like, no, I'm not going home now. Like, there's an hour left. I'm going to finish the hour. So then at the end, they're like, so what do you think? And I'm like, I told you like twice now, like, this job is not for me. Like, how much more clear can I get?
Yeah. That's a hard pass.
Like, yeah, totally. And then they were like, okay, so why don't we just call it even? And I'm like, call what even? What do you mean? Exactly. Like, I was like, what do you mean? Call what even? And they were like, well, we haven't processed your payroll paperwork yet with HR. So why don't we just call it even? And I was like, what, like, mean I don't get paid? And they were like, well, yeah, we haven't put the paperwork in. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not. No. I'm like, I didn't just work 6 hours in the middle of the night
for nothing.
Right? Yeah. And I still, to be honest, I can't remember if they ever actually did pay me. But I was like Like, I don't know if I ever got a check mailed to my house or whatever. But
That's awesome.
that's the worst job I ever had, because it was just like, there was no, like I just couldn't believe how like nonchalant they were in their hiring. I couldn't believe how zero training, like it's just literally like sink or swim.
Yeah,
Even if I destroyed the place, like, right, I could have knocked a whole like freaking aisle over.
Totally. Sorry
Like,
about that. I had no idea how to use that.
Yeah, like we've seen that meme where it's like all the cardboard boxes in the warehouse, and it's like, this just happened, what would you tell your boss? That could have been me.
Yeah.
And like they would have been like, what happened? I would have been like, I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
The funny thing about that though is that using that pallet jack actually benefited me in my next job, which is working at Toys R Us. And at Toys R Us, like they showed me a little bit because I was working in the back and unloading trucks and stuff. And they were like, here's how you use the pallet jack. And I was like, thank you. Like, this is great. And then I became like a master at using the pallet jack, riding them like a scooter and stuff like that. So but at that grocery store, that was like the worst job for sure.
I know that you, like me, you do most of the cooking in your house.
Yeah.
What's your best? What's your go-to?
The best thing that I make. Oh man.
So I guess I should probably grab your kids for this one.
Yeah, or my wife.
Or your wife, exactly.
Yeah, geez. I mean, we really like, oh, there's the dog. You know what? It might be homemade pizza.
Ooh.
Because pizza restaurant for 9 years. So you think I don't, but we make the dough fresh in the bread maker. And so as a result, it's like fresh dough straight up, like you would get at a pizzeria, no frozen dough crusts, like that kind of stuff. So that's probably my go-to, like in terms of like what I'm most proud of, which, like I say, is hilarious because I have the experience.
Yeah, thankfully.
Working in a pizza restaurant, you know, and we made dough on a much larger scale. But yeah, that's probably it. But because there's really labor intensive, like it takes like 2 hours to make it.
Totally. Yeah, we do big like pierogi fests here at the house. Everybody comes over, you know, make the dough,
roll out the dough,
and yeah, it's pretty cool. Just
yeah,
hang
my
out.
mom used to do that actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably it. We call it Wiebe.
We call it Wiebes. Okay,
Fitting, right?
Yeah. I heard weeds.
No.
That's not Brian. That's
not me.
Brian. No.
I mean, I like making, like, I love making a stir fry. The other night I made a teriyaki chicken stir fry. Like that's super easy.
Yeah.
It's not difficult for me to make, but I loved it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, spaghetti and meatballs, same thing. Like, it's all good.
Yeah. All right, I'll ask you a few more and then we'll wrap it up here.
That's all good.
Have you ever bungee jumped? Skydived?
No.
Would
never.
You? Like, say if BCIT were like, okay, we're gonna do a radio thing and we want the instructors to take the, you know, would you do something like that if they were offered it?
It's easy to say without the piece of paper in front of me being like, would you do this? So I mean, the short answer is yeah, probably.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I think I have done both in the past for
right.
radio stations.
Right.
And I probably would take the pass now.
Well, okay, I'll put it this way. At my age, I'd probably take the pass.
Right.
You know, like, you know, maybe 20 years ago, no problem. But now, yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, dude, 20, that's about it for me. Like, it was about 20 years ago.
Right.
In Victoria. And I was all about it at the time, like mid-20s. I was like, fuck yeah, let's go. I totally want to do this. And now I'd be like, I think I'll be down here having a beer. I'll be the encouraging guy at the bottom.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because for me, it's not a fear thing. Like, it's not that I would be afraid to do it.
Right.
But like, I mean, I hurt getting out of bed.
Right.
So
yes,
like,
exactly.
You know, like so now that I think about it, like that's the only thing that would deter me from doing it. It's not that I'd be like, oh, I don't want to.
You might hurt yourself.
Yeah. Like, I'd be worried that like can't get up the next day. Like, and not even from like an accident, just from
because
it wrenched my neck or like whatever. Like we've said it with our kids, like if they ever want to do something like that, like, and it's funny because my wife, she's like, you can do that if you want. Don't tell me till after. Like, don't say, hey, mom, I'm going to go skydiving, or hey, mom, I'm going to go bungee jumping. Come back and be like, hey, mom, I went skydiving and here I am. Right? Like, that's totally different. So we've said that with the kids. Like, it's totally cool if you want to go do it, but tell us after that you did and that you're alive and well and standing beside us, instead of like, hey, I'm going to go. Because then we're like, oh my God.
Yeah. Who's the most famous person you've met?
Oh, geez.
Because I know you've met a ton of people, like going to, you know, now Brian does the smart thing when he goes to concerts, or at least he used to when he was younger.
Yeah.
You'd go in the back and you'd kind of wait at the buses and shit and meet and get stuff signed and everything else.
Yeah.
It's a smart way to do it. Who were some of the bigger names?
I met BC Boys.
Nice.
I met REM. I met Sonic Youth. I met Dave Grohl. Not at the Nirvana show, actually, though, at a Foo Fighters show.
Okay.
Geez, who else? I mean, I did end up meeting Elastica. Yeah, I mean, I've got a whole bunch of autographs. I remember I was going through a box and I was like, oh, I forgot I met them. Like, I'm going through this box, I find the autograph and I'm like, oh yeah, Slater Kinney, I met them. I forgot I did.
Yeah. I think I saw you posting something on Facebook
I did
about a month or two back where you're like, holy shit, this set list is awesome. And it's like, what? Sonic Youth set list? That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. Well, and what's funny about that Sonic Youth set list that you're talking about is that it was when they opened for REM at the Coliseum. So the Coliseum isn't the type of place that is an easy place to get a set list.
No.
Right? Like you're far from the stage because there's the barricades there. So I have no idea in my memory how I got that set list. Like I probably asked security. I mean, I remember doing that at times because it would be during sets. And let's be honest, the Sonic Youth REM crowd isn't the most rowdy on the planet. And so I you know, never mind that's at the Coliseum. It's like road seating. Like it wasn't what do they call that? Festival seating. Wasn't festival seating. And so, yeah, like it's a very good chance that I was like, hey, can you get me that? And they were like, sure.
Oh, probably.
That's the only way I can think that I got it. But yeah, like Slater Kinney was a perfect example of that. Cause I mean, I love that band. And I found an old Discorder, you know, like the CITR paper. And they were on the cover and they had actually like doodled, like, instead of just like, hey, signing it, Corin Tucker, Carrie Brownstein, it was like they had doodled on it. So like on Corin, she drew like angel wings on herself, and it was like Angel of Death, Corin Tucker. Like it was hilarious.
Nice. Didn't she do something with the hell's the guy's name from SNL?
Fred Armisen.
Yeah, Portlandia.
Yeah, yeah, that was Carrie.
Carrie, yeah. Did you see that? That was pretty funny stuff.
Oh, that show was hilarious.
Yeah,
just hilarious. Like she's a riot. She's
funny.
Like Carrie's a fantastic actor. And then I mean an unreal guitarist too. So yeah, I think that's probably like Beasties is probably the most famous, although REM is REM.
REM's big, man.
You know, they're probably the most famous that I met, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, last one. Tell us a near-death story where you could have died.
You know, the only near-death stories that I have all involve like being in the car.
Right.
So
driving treacherous BC highways in winter.
Yeah. Like I don't think, well, no, not only just that, but also driving after a show when I'm like dead, exhausted, tired.
Right.
So like I can't think of something specific, but I know there have been instances where I'm driving home and it's like, you know, kind of thing. Yeah. Or it's like the other side and it's like there's cars coming. Like that's the only thing I can think of where I actually ever thought like I better like snap out of this. Because
window goes down a little bit, slap in the face.
Yeah. Crank the radio like that. That's the kind of, so I don't have anything like specific where it was like, oh, we almost drove off a cliff or, you know, anything like that. But yeah, there were definitely, like you talk about the highways, like there were definitely some times where I was like, my car's not going to stop. Like we would skid, and I'm like, wherever it lands, it lands. And I'm not saying like, oh hey, it might, like, no, it actually did skid, and I was just trying to straighten out, trying to not hit the barricade, trying to not hit the mountain on this side. But I never did. So that's the thing. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's as near death as I would have been.
I would say if you,
but
yeah, man, that's death. But looking at it anyway, well, it's close.
It also very well could have just been like, oh, a dent in the passenger door. So like, I don't know,
right.
I don't know how close to death it was, but there were some white knuckle times. Definitely driving to, when my wife worked in the Kootenays, you know, and I'd be driving 6 hours to go visit her, over the Okanagan Connector, over the Paulson Summit between Grand Forks and Castlegar. Like that's not fun to drive in the winter. That's,
no.
And I mean, like I'd be traversing like however many mountain passes there were, right? Like it would be from the interior, and then it's like over one mountain, and then it's like, oh, we're in a valley, then over another mountain. Like that's just the way it is driving that way.
Things you do for love.
Yeah, man, it was worth it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Awesome. All right, Brian, let's wrap it up here. Thank you again for jumping on. You're easy to find on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Brian_Weibe, WIEBE. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is just your name.
Well, Twitter is the most active where I'm at. Instagram, I don't think I've posted anything in over a year. So it's like it's not really much there to see. Yeah. But Twitter for sure, and of course BCHL Network, like all the other places where you can get my stuff. So like if you're into tennis, Odlum Brown Van Open, we're at vanopen.com, bcsuperweek.ca, of course, bcit.ca/radio. That's where you can find us there. And of course, Evolution 1079. That stuff's awesome.
Cool. All right, bud. We'll see you online.